Okay.
Hi, my name is Bill Surrey, and lived in Highland Park, raised in Highland Park, with the Surrey family there in Lindenwood, with my brother David, my older brother David, my younger brother Rick, and then we had two older stepsisters, Karen and Julie at the time, and together we just kind of grew up in that house. We had almost like two families in that house. We had different lifestyles within there, and so there's a lot of things that we did differently that David remembers, that I remember differently, because we were involved in two different areas of our lives. But for the most part, we had the same house we grew up in, the home we grew up in, and we were both there during the times when my father was working at Johnson Printing Company, and also a member of the John Birch Society and the American Nazi Party. Did you want to cut for a second? Okay. I didn't know she was leaving. I'm sorry, interrupted. Cut that out. So, but a lot of the minutes I just saw what David had talked about, and it was pretty interesting the way he looked at some of the things and what I did. So for the basic thing is that David spent a lot more time with my father and off with my dad. I spent a lot of time even in elementary school and stuff, playing sports and stuff at school. So my focus might have been a little different, and what I remember influenced by the times I spent doing that. Now, but the different events that we remember, particularly the one the night that Edwin Walker was shot at, I can remember specifically being there that night. We were stuffing envelopes, literature and stuff to pass out, and to get the people for them to vote. My father was, I don't remember exactly what his position was, but he was working hard to get him elected.
Well, it was the election, governor's election was in 62.
So I think we were stuffing for
So
something else.
60. So
you know, I don't know what we were stuffing for then.
I don't
so
know.
that was April 10th of 63 is when the date you're talking about.
We were stuffing envelopes. As kids,
Right.
what we did,
Mhm.
our parents used us to do stuff, and we
Right.
just did it. And we had fun doing it. It was a good thing. We'd run through, and we'd have races of who could pack the envelope the quickest. But then we got to the end, and I think we ran out of a particular piece, and they wanted to wait till they could print some more, whatever it was. But they said we were done for the night. So all I did is I remember just piling in the car, and different people would get into different cars, and we headed home. And I could not say who was in the car with me or not. But we just got home, and we weren't home very long when we got a call to get back to General Walker's house right away, and at which point we did. And when we got back there, we found out that somebody had shot at him.
Had the police arrived yet?
I don't remember the police there. I don't remember when the police got there. But when we came into the house, because there's a front entrance and a rear entrance, there's a lot more activity going on behind the house than in front of the house. We pulled up in front of the house, and when we went into his house, it was kind of like a living area off to the side, like a parlor. And so then we were kind of sitting in there trying to find out what was going on, and we heard that he'd been shot at. They kind of kept us there in the front part. We didn't go into the other areas. But after, and as a kid, you lose track of time, but it seemed like a long time. It was probably maybe not more than half an hour. They took us back there and showed us the holes where the bullet went through. And I just recall them saying something, if it hadn't hit this, he'd probably be dead. And I think they were referring to something in the wall, on the wall, or whatever.
Window frame, I think.
The window frame, okay. I just as a kid, I remember them saying, boy, it hit something and just set it off just enough to miss it. And to me, that didn't mean a lot. I just thought, okay, you know, because I was a kid, probably 10, 11 years old, I don't, at that time.
Layla, in the house, please.
And so all that activity was going on, and then they took us back to the house. And as I heard David's story, I thought, well, I wasn't there when the shot went off or anything like that.
Okay,
But then,
I finally weaseled my way out. I had to say goodbye 10 times.
What camera?
it's okay.
Okay.
Too late. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, honey.
We need signs up.
Yeah, I get it.
Quiet. So as he told the story, I don't recall David. I don't remember him specifically being with us when we went home. And a lot of times he and my dad would go places together, so it was nothing out of the ordinary not to have David with us. So anyway, we went back home and we heard later that he got shot at, that he'd been shot, and that I knew later, probably years later, when David and I were talking, And my wife, we were all talking about stuff like this. He told me about his adventure behind the house, which I think was where all the activity and stuff was going on when we were in front of the parlor. And maybe they're trying to protect us from some of the stuff.
The police or something out there?
Yeah, I don't know. They were probably just keeping us from all the activity that was going on in the back. So we'd gone home with that, and that's pretty much all I remember of that particular event. And I heard sometime later that he'd gotten in some trouble with the police in the park and these types of things. But my interests weren't into school, politics, and all that. At the time, I was kind of focusing on playing sports and things. So my memory of those types of things, I just kind of blew off. However, one of the things that continued in our house were the meetings at night.
Let me ask y'all a question.
Sure.
Do y'all think, well, of course, we suppose that this was Oswald that took the shot, right? That's what we think. There's a lot of indications.
That's possible, yes.
If it was Oswald, do you think he was trying to, whoever shot at him was really trying to kill him? Did they miss intentionally?
I don't think they would have missed intentionally.
I don't either, because I mean, if you can shoot a guy supposedly like he did from a building 600 yards away.
As time went on, you look
not
back,
miss a guy sitting there 200 yards away from you.
is that there might have been a reason they wanted the distraction for Edwin Walker, whether it was to leave the shell case, whatever it was, because David talked about going out shooting, and that's where I first shot my 30-06. David was old enough to remember who went with him. I didn't. My dad was taking me shooting, so I remember my dad. And but there was always.
Did you go with him on that?
I didn't go with David.
That time?
Not that
No.
time.
Not that time.
I don't remember going shooting with David,
I remember shooting with
but I remember my dad taking me shooting,
Uh-huh.
and we did collect the shells. But that's where I first shot this 30-06, and they also did a 20 gauge shotgun that we wanted to make sure I knew how to shoot and those types of things. And he had a pistol too. Couldn't tell you. Now I'm looking back, it's probably a 38, and he would fire. But I remember collecting the shells and all that. And as we was talking about these stories, I thought maybe they might use those shells later because I couldn't. We were out in the middle of nowhere. Why would you collect shells out here?
Back then, you didn't pick up your.
You didn't pick up
What's
your shells.
the point?
You left them. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was, and there was quite often too. They might lay down a mat and shoot on the mat, make the shells easier to pick up. But so I probably at least 3 times I went out there shooting with my dad, and there's different people there, but I couldn't name who was there with us. But many folks were doing that. So that was interesting to find out that he'd gone shooting with him too. And I did think it was strange that we picked up shells when I was a kid. I thought we were just collecting them. I have no idea.
Yeah, back in the 60s, when you fired guns, you didn't
You
care.
did.
You didn't keep yourself.
You didn't
But
care.
as a kid, I didn't know. You just, hey, let's collect the shells. It was cool. And boy, you pick up the hot ones too. Those were a lot of fun. But as he's going through that, and then some of those trips that he made with Dad, he would tend to only take one of us, because when I went on some trips with him, he only took me. He wouldn't take Rick, which was, I thought was abnormal, because usually Rick and I were always together if David wasn't there. Because we were taught that David was kind of a troublemaker.
He was.
Yeah, and they didn't want us to. Yeah.
My best friend was Jewish. What do you expect?
So
At least the range.
we didn't hang out with David a lot. We knew he was going to get in a lot of trouble. Not to mention that eventually Rick and I, my younger brother and I, stole a car and went to juvenile detention home. Okay, so David was such a bad influence. He wasn't even living with us when we did that. But so we had a lot of events going on in the house. But most of the American Nazi Party is what I remember the most. The John Birch, I remember the society coming through and the little different things. But I think I was a little ahead of my time of memory. But I specifically remember the American Nazi Party. George Lincoln Rockwell autographed a book for me called "This Time in the World" that he'd written, and it was up in the room where David had mentioned where all the propaganda and stuff was. They turned it into kind of a mini warehouse in literature, but they kept the bed in there, and that's where Rockwell would stay and sleep. And we also had other guests that a lot of times we had no idea who they were, and meals would be taken up to them. So don't know who those people were. I'm not saying they were bad people or good people, but I have no idea who they were. I was just a kid.
They was in the house and you didn't know who
You
the
would
hell
not
they
know.
were?
No. The movements in the house too, and there's a
By
lot
that
of
time
times
I was gone.
he was
Pretty
gone.
much gone
He was
by that
gone,
time.
but there was it's pretty normal for us to be told just to go into our room,
Uh-huh.
and then just wait till we call you. And so if anybody was coming in or out, it was pretty long. And normally there was somebody in the room after one of the Nazi meetings. One of the things that I benefited from is I actually took money out of the offering place because they had put money sitting around and they collect the money at night. And I had a morning news paper out, delivered Dallas Morning News, Wall Street Journal, and so I get up in the morning after those meetings, and what I thought was, I grabbed 15 or 20 bucks, and I thought I was rich, but there was money all over the place, and usually a nice swastika hanging from somewhere in the house. And this was common. I would say probably at least twice a month they'd have these meetings there, and it might have been more, might have been less. I don't remember, but I can pretty well. It was pretty regular during that time. This whole frame actually going into the John Birch that I remember as a kid, and building the float and entering the float on the 4th of July in Dallas, and then moving into the night. This is all over about a 2-3 year period, so it was kind of condensed into a little area until I got in enough trouble where they took me out of my dad's home, and it was either go spend time in jail or go live with my mom. So I opted to go live with my mom, and that's when I moved out of the house. And from that point on, I understood they just sold the house for everything they could. They had to get out of town. They made it sound as if it was all voluntary, that they sold the house, Christmas decorations, everything for cash. And they had a like a Type C travel lodge home on the back of the truck, a truck that traveled in, and they took off in it. And they took off for about a year or something like that, and I don't think anybody heard of them until they opened up a health food store, nutrition cottage down in Boca Raton, Florida. And meanwhile, I'd gone to live with my mom, that part, and then I ended up moving back in with my dad for my senior year in high school and graduated from Boca Raton. But back in these areas here, when I was going through what David was talking about, it was really interesting too, is because his view.
Let me ask, what about the Elaine Luttrell? I think she's the one that bought the house, at least.
Okay, yes. Probably 3 years ago, we were taking a tour down through Dallas, and then we had our daughter with us, Erica, and we saw that our house. We drove by our house where it was, and we saw that it was for sale. So I just got out and went to knock on the door and talked to the lady. And when I stopped in front of the house, she kind of came out. And so I talked to her. I said, "Hey, yeah, we used to, we were looking at this house." She said, "Well, let me tell you a little bit about it." She did not know who we were. And she said, "Yeah, when we moved into the house, we had the FBI and everybody come. And they said that basically, before we could move into the house, they had to come in and take out all the wires and tappings that they had strung through this house. So somehow the FBI or whoever had gotten into the house, had it all wiretapped and strapped, which means that through those years, all those meetings, the Nazi Party meetings and all that, were probably being recorded, or at least verbally. I don't know if visually.
By parties unknown.
Yeah, by parties unknown. But she said that when they took her up and showed her, that she saw all these wires up in the attic, all over the place up in the attic. And so she left or whatever. She said it took them about 2 weeks to clean the house out, and before she could move into the house. And I said, "Well, that's really interesting. That was my dad," because she told me that, well, the guy that lived here was a president of the American Nazi Party. I don't know if he was president, but he was pretty far up there.
I know he's a secretary.
It was whatever it was, but her story was he was the president of the American Nazi Party. So I said, "Well, yeah," and I let her know that was my dad. So she gave us a tour through the house, which was really interesting to see your childhood house, and they'd added on to it and stuff. But that was pretty neat. That was her story about the house when our family lived there.
Wouldn't your dad know that the wiring was there?
Don't know. And that's one of those things that when she told the story.
Maybe he does. Maybe the whole thing was just like the shells laying in one part of the warehouse,
if it's
and
up in
laying
your,
in the other.
if it's something up in my warehouse, in my attic.
Well, it was also.
I'd know.
You would think you would, but there was no reason. There was an easy way to get it. It wasn't like you had a staircase or anything to get up in the attic. You actually push the square up there and get up to there. Because I went up there as a kid when I was a kid, but I don't remember seeing anything when I was a kid up there. I don't remember seeing wires, but there wasn't something any part of the house most people normally went into. And then, what's interesting too is that right prior to this stuff, we added on to the house. Now, if you would have asked me, I said, when did they start putting wires in the house? When the den was added on to our house. Okay, so I don't know who the contractors were or any of that, but once that den was added onto our house was blocked from that point. So I think there was some kind of correlation. As a kid, it's
Do you have an idea when the den was added?
Yeah. Were you there when the den was added?
I was. I lived and crawled out on the roof many times.
Yeah. So it had to be in about 60,
Yeah.
1960. They added the den on.
59, 60.
Yeah, right in that area. And they added the den on. So, looking back now, the wiring there would have been a great opportunity.
And that's why they were still in the John Birch Society area
Yeah.
at that point in time. He wasn't into the American Nazi Party yet. That was coming.
But that would explain easily how they had to run wires to places or whatever, electrical
Right.
wires.
Yeah.
So that would have been my guess when they wired the house. But they had to get that stuff out of there. Once the house was sold to another party, another person, they had to take all that stuff out of the house.
How about that? She, from what looking at the property records, I think it was Elaine Luttrell. I think was the name of the lady.
Okay.
And
She had a bakery. She baked in the house. She had done, if you know that.
it was sold. This Elaine Luttrell sold it back a few years ago, and now she's living right over here on the other side of Joseph.
He's going to go talk to her.
She's not that far away.
Well,
from
yeah, I
here.
talked because she's the one who told us the story about that.
Uh-huh.
And but she was baking. She had showed us the kitchen, and she had a double Dutch oven and stuff because she said she ran a bakery or something. So whatever she does. But she was real proud of us for it. But it was kind of interesting. But as we lived in that house, I believe my parents tried to keep us separated from those events in their political life. They used us when they needed to, but I think they tried to keep us apart. Somehow we got in trouble at school a lot, and teachers would talk to us. I don't know if they were trying to pump us for information or what it was. But as a kid, I just thought some of this stuff was pretty neat. We had communism is Jewish stickers. We sang a song, send those
nigger.
Yeah, one of the songs was send those apes back to their trees, ship those niggers back. And I just remember those were big songs in our family at the time. And also that Edwin Walker, that song that we sing with him. And they were total anti-Kennedys and very upset with the situation. And once Kennedy got elected, I remember my dad thinking it was the end of America as we knew it. And so I can remember some of those things as a kid. And the shooting, I remember in 6th grade, we were watching the parade downtown because at the end it was going through Dallas. So our class went to the auditorium and we just were watching it on a TV or whatever.
Yeah, I was down there.
Yeah. So, and then I can remember then all of a sudden there was shooting. Of course, nobody knew what was going on when the shooting, and they just took us back to our classroom, and we found out later that night that what had happened. But so then stuff started coming together, and as time went on, I don't know what time you left. Was it before or after he was shot that you moved out? I don't remember when you moved out. It was after he moved
Just
out.
a little bit after.
That's
Not long after. Very short.
because then I really remember the Nazi Party becoming big, and that house we were building up in Oklahoma. I think we were done with it, and we were actually spending some time in it then.
I was gone by the time we got done.
But his story, the printing thing, was kind of funny because one night I went with my dad to printing. He would take, again, I don't know if it was under camouflage or just nobody's going to bother.
Why would he do that? Why would he?
Just I always had somebody with him, one of the kids with him, and so we went into the printing thing, and we were lining up the cuts, and these stickers were probably 1 by 3 inches long, so you could just peel them and stick them places. And
Thousands of them.
yeah,
Little square
yeah,
blocks,
communism is Jewish is the one, and did you know Jews own 99% of all television? I forget some of the other ones, but they're all different ones. Well, we were getting in a hurry, and we boxed all this stuff up, and he was making his final cuts, and printers would know what this was. It was the final cut coming through the print. And what he was trying to do was dry the room up. I'm not sure exactly what all that was, but he had the fans going. And when he hit that final cut, the glue wasn't good on that last batch. And those stickers just flew up all over the place. The wind blew, the fans were blowing them everywhere. So he yelled, cut the fans, cut the fans. So we shot down the fan. Well, we spent the next 2 hours rushing, picking stickers, communism is Jewish stickers, off the light fixtures, off of everywhere in that printing press, because we had to find every one of those. But at that point, I thought, this is strange, because I actually thought my dad owned the printing place, and I thought, why does he care that these things are here? But as it turns out, he was going in there at night, using all the printing presses from Johnson. I believe he's using the name Eagle Printing, or American Eagle.
American Eagle.
American Eagle Printing, for what he was printing. And when you look back at that was kind of funny. Great evening I spent with my dad. I enjoyed it. He was panic stricken, obviously, but as a kid, it was a lot of fun just to see that go through. Dan, I don't know if you remember, were you there when they put the communist flag up down the street?
No.
Okay. Once my parents were known Nazis in the area, and I don't know if it's from the news, because my dad was on the news quite a bit and stuff too, but I remember once they did that, we actually put a Nazi flag out in our front yard for the first time. And I remember the police came by and made us take our Nazi flag down, but the people down the street didn't have to take their communist flag down. And it just riled my father to no end, obviously. But obviously, the neighborhood was kind of dangerous. There was times where we would literally all, depends on what kind of alert we got, or I don't know who would call us and alert us. I don't know if the police would call us, or my dad would call us because he'd be out of town or something. And we'd all spend a night in the master bedroom with literally the doors. I mean, the windows had nails in them. We put the nails into the windows. And always kept a loaded gun, pistol there, by the bedside. And because we just never knew what was going to go on. We didn't know what would happen. There were many trips, and again, once David left, there were a lot of times my dad would grab me and take trips. I can remember a lot of stuff to do with, before the assassination, I can remember a trip that I went to a house, and I thought, just as a kid, after I looked back, I thought, we were there at an Oswald place, but it was in Louisiana. And for some reason, they didn't let me in the back part of the house where my dad and everybody was going and stuff. I kind of stayed in the front. And I remember seeing signs for stormtroopers and things like that, but I just didn't, at the time, didn't know. I was just a kid, and so I was just sitting out in the front, and we left. But it was funny later, as I thought I remembered that name when I heard it, but it could not have been. It didn't much matter. So, but there's lots of other trips we went on with my dad with, and he took me on to different places. But his goal was to get the stormtrooper group and have them either sponsor or get like a Hell's Angel group or some type of gang, because they wanted the stormtroopers to become known in America, and that was one of the things he was pushing and working on doing. Trying to think of some of the other things, Johnson Printing, Eagle Printing. And one of the things too is after the Warren Commission report, he printed up a, and I haven't seen one, but it was probably 11 by 14 booklet on report from the Warren Commission report. And we were going around the neighborhood selling those things to people. And I believe it was his version of the Warren Commission report. And I haven't seen that thing since as a kid. I just remember as a kid going through it, it was what was wrong with the Warren Commission report and how bad that they had treated some of the evidence and stuff that they had in it. And how they had covered a lot of things that weren't true. And, just normal stuff from the other side. As we talked about that house up there too, that was a great event that I had. But as a kid, I had more fun events as opposed to political and adult thoughts of the neighborhood. When I went up there, it was all fun. It was like to get there. I mean, we literally weaved through trees to get to where we wanted to go, and then we got to this creek crossing. And as David was telling the story, I probably didn't get out and move some rocks. I remember we had to get across. There was only one place you could get across that was flat enough to drive across. And actually, one time we came back and the waters were too strong, and we actually had to spend another day there to get back. But to get the water to where the car would go across it, because the car was lower set, and we would get out of the car and walk across, I guess for the weight, so we wouldn't weigh down the car as much. I mean, I don't know how much an inch makes a difference, but it must have made a difference.
Every inch.
We walked across that. But it was funny because where they picked, they must have built a bed because the car went across pretty flat. But then on the storms and when it drove, when it was heavy, we used to put some kind of rock or something that broke some of the water up. That's David's memory of it. I was just a kid. We were probably over there chasing flies or something while he was doing that. But I remember being there, and then on the way home, everybody picking ticks off of each other because that place had a lot of ticks. And we did a lot of, actually the construction part of it, we stayed in tents in there for the first part when we were up there. And then we would start building the house, and I remember how they built it. I watched them build it, put the foundation in, the poles and stuff. And it's interesting, he says that the tunnels, what we did when, because I didn't realize there were tunnels under there. what I do remember is as we built the foundation and the poles up, that he ran pole, and we were talking probably, now that I'm an adult, a good 8x8 for foundations on the sides. It's good across the side, and then some 2x4s and stuff across to give firm. But they put some they were under the part between the pillars, and I didn't ever understood. I thought there was some kind of foundation for the pillars, you know, to put them between to keep the pillars straight. As a kid, I didn't know. So I don't know what that was about. But as an adult now, I look back and go, I don't know why they had them under there. Because all I remember then and older, so we used to run underneath there all the time, but I never remember the tunnel part, but I can remember the logs and stuff being underneath there. So there's different memories of where we were and what we were doing. And again, my memories are more of the outhouse that my mom made, my stepmother made, was that everybody came from around to look at it because she actually made a men's and a women's side to the outhouse. And on the women's side, she wallpapered it and everything and painted it, and it really was the prettiest outhouse in Oklahoma. I can tell you, and people would come just to see it. Just to see it.
Oh, real boys, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah. But then it was totally self-sufficient. The way he described the house is correct. You walked in, there's a big potbelly stove there, which warmed up the whole house. And it was one big room. There was a kitchen. We had a kettle. The store. It was all wood-burning stove. Everything was done self-sufficient there. We did have some phones, but I can remember the guy's name. He was something who had a lot of military behind him.
Yeah.
It's that other family. Because he had a crank phone, field phones, that you could actually crank and ring and talk to somebody. I guarantee you the creek was at least 200 yards, 100 yards at least, down to the creek. I'm sorry. Let's say about 300 feet, but about 100 yards at least down to the creek where people would go down and bathe. We'd wash in the creek down there.
Mm-hmm.
And
have a clue what the name of the creek is?
when he said Moyer,
Moyer's the name of town.
Moyer's the name of the town. I don't even know if the creek had a name. I don't think I ever remember hearing
There's
the
a creek in that area, yeah.
Yeah, but we actually would go down there, and I had to take a 22. We had a 22 rifle. I would take it down there. My sisters were going to take a bath to shoot snakes if they came up, and so I remember that part of the.
Our country boys were trying to look over the trees.
Yeah,
I think that happened once too. I think that did happen one time.
Did they? I don't.
The girls came running back. Oh, some girls did.
But,
yeah, they were older, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Well, Julie was. She was in the same grade as you were,
Yeah.
but she was a year older because you started school in September and your birthday went until November, and she had started.
Well, I skipped that grade.
Okay, let's get great. So, all right. So again, he went to school. He was smart. I wasn't. I played sports. Okay. But yeah, the sticker and that song that we sang, all that other stuff too. I think the only thing in there, a couple things I didn't remember was the tunnels, just for the reference. But I remember beams between these two. But I don't know if the beams were placeholders or what. And I wasn't there when the shot went off. I was home. But David easily could have been in there when the shots were. That's his story because I couldn't say I wasn't there when it happened. But I know it happened that night after we left, and we'd come home.
Which is unusual because the police said that there was nobody there that night. That's what the official police report said.
Right.
Oh,
And
we were there.
We were there.
We were there before,
We were there.
and I know I was there before and after that night.
Yeah.
When that happened.
So the police are saying that, and like he said, you know what? I'm thinking back too. I don't recall a policeman walking through them.
No, I didn't see it. I
don't even recall that.
That was why I had to guess they were all in the back of the feet.
You know they had to come.
I'm going to send in an open record report on the the offense report.
Yeah.
For that day. I don't know if they'll provide it, but I'm going to send.
It might. Well, it would provide an answer. At least it would tell you whether someone was dispatched or not to that address.
Well, they may not have records 50 years old down there.
I would have thought all that stuff got sequestered or something.
Yeah, that's
The Warren Commission.
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
I'm thinking they would have that on a record somewhere because they probably confiscated all that kind of stuff.
Well, how would they know that the bullet was the same type as the type?
Yeah, but how did they find it? Who found it and gave it to the police?
Yeah, that's true.
It actually went through the wall. My reading went through the wall and was somewhere in the next room laying on something. And it actually jumped through the wall, and the detectives found it in the next room laying.
So the detectives were out there. They had to be out there.
Right.
Because they wouldn't have let us, as kids, go back in there and look at where the holes were. Of course, back then, crime was a little different than now. So it was, you know,
Yeah, that's probably why y'all were kept up front.
Yeah.
The cops were probably back there.
I don't recall ever being in front.
you were probably in the backyard. You weren't even in the house then.
You don't remember seeing the cops at all?
No, I don't, to be honest with you. Because I was with my dad in his car, running around.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it, you know, and then when we got back, maybe they were there at that point in time, and I just didn't pay attention to it, I don't know.
Right.
So,
And
I was kind of shocked with the meeting the other person at the curb, and, you know, that, I guess that to me meant that somebody else was out chasing the bad guy. That's what I thought was going on.
well, and then it also mentioned the other room in our house up there that we were building. And I remember wanting to know who the fourth family was and why they only needed one bedroom, because we all had kids in our side. And I thought that was a little strange to have a room set aside. So I just figured, oh, we had company or something like that, because our house, we had
Guest
a bedroom
room.
set aside.
Guest room.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many people
in the middle of
Plaza Creek in Moyer, Oklahoma?
As a kid, you don't think about stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, but we did have one kid get blown off the top of a. He wanted to get some plywood into town, put him on top of the station wagon, and told the kid to lay down on top of it. Yeah, this really happened, and told him to hold on to the sides. Well, at about 30 miles an hour, he let go.
That's enough,
A little
Dad.
flying saucer and the plywood. And anyway, so they were late getting home that night because they had to stop at the hospital on the way home and patch his kid up. Fortunately, I think he was just scratched up pretty heavily.
Yeah.
So even at 30 miles an hour, you know, hitting stuff's gonna hurt. So, but we had a lot of great adventures. But as a kid, that's what I remember most was the adventures, not so much the environment and what was going on around me. I thought it was great. I had a blast making the float. We actually. Everybody talked about how beautiful it was. It looked like roses and stuff. I wish you could see a picture of it. I don't know if you ever get a picture of it. But it's all napkins. And we used chicken mail wire on the back. And we would take napkins, pull them in the center, make them look like flowers, pull them around the back, and rubber band them onto this chicken wire. And then we made this big float, the John Birch Society float and stuff. And they had to keep it hidden until the actual day of it and pull it down there. And boy, they're screaming and yelling and stuff. There was a lot going on.
I'm running out of tape.
Okay. Let's
And
stop it there.
I need to go back. Are we about finished?
Yeah.
We got some more, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop